Dr. Kim Hana was alone on Kepler Station when the alien ships came out of nowhere like ghosts in the dark space around the mining base. Her fingers moved quickly over the computer screen as she studied the strange blue crystals she had found in the asteroid belt 3 months ago. Everyone else had run away to Earth when the first scary message came from the big black ships that now surrounded the station like hungry wolves. The message was simple and terrible. The aliens called themselves the Fourth Empire, and they wanted all humans to give up and become slaves, or they would kill everyone. Hana could have taken the last escape pod that waited for her in the docking bay, but she did not move from her laboratory. The crystals were too important, and she was too close to understanding their secrets. She looked through the big window at the 12 massive ships that floated outside. Each one was 3 times bigger than any human warship, and they looked like they were made of black metal that moved like it was alive. Dark red lights pulsed across their surfaces like a heartbeat, and Hana felt cold when she looked at them, but she did not look away. The station shook when the alien ships attached themselves to the docking ports. Hana heard the metal walls groaning under the weight of the visitors. She knew they were coming for her, but she kept working with her crystals. The blue stones seemed to glow brighter when she touched them, and sometimes she thought she could hear them whispering in a language she did not understand. Heavy footsteps echoed through the empty corridors, getting closer to her lab. The aliens moved through the station like liquid shadows, and Hana could hear them breaking down doors and searching every room. When they finally reached her laboratory, the door exploded inward with a loud bang and smoke filled the air. The creature that walked through the smoke was bigger than any human Hana had ever seen. It stood almost 3 meters tall with 4 powerful arms and skin that looked like dark stone. Its eyes burned like red coals in a face that had too many sharp teeth. When it spoke, the universal translator on the wall turned its voice into words that sounded like rocks grinding together. Human. "You will come with us," the alien said, as it looked around the laboratory at all the equipment and crystal samples. "Your species will serve the Fourth Empire or be destroyed completely." 3 more aliens came into the room behind their leader. They carried weapons that hummed with energy, and their eyes never stopped watching Hana as she sat at her workstation. One of them was smaller than the others and kept looking at the glowing crystals with what might have been fear or respect. Hana did not stand up right away. Instead, she saved her work on the computer and carefully put her crystal samples back in their protective cases. She moved slowly and calmly, even though her heart was beating fast. The aliens watched her every movement, but they did not try to stop her. "I am not going anywhere," she said quietly as she finally stood up and faced the huge alien leader. "This is my work, my station, and you have no right to be here." The alien leader stepped closer, and Hana could smell something, like burning metal coming from its body. It towered over her, and she barely reached the middle of its chest, but she did not step backward or show any fear. The other aliens made sounds that might have been laughter as they watched their leader. "Try to scare one small human woman. You do not understand, little human," the leader said, as it leaned down to look directly into Hana's eyes. "This is not a request that you can refuse. You will do what we say, or you will die right here in this room." Hana looked up at the burning red eyes and felt something strong and fierce wake up inside her chest. Her grandfather had fought in wars that tried to destroy his country. Her parents had survived disasters that killed millions of people she carried. Their strength in her blood and their courage in her heart. The crystals on her work table began to glow brighter as if they could sense her emotions. The blue light reflected off the walls and made strange shadows dance across the ceiling. The youngest alien soldier took a step backward and said something in the Vorth language that made the others look nervous. "You can try," Hana said, and her voice carried across the silent laboratory like a challenge thrown at the feet of giants. The alien leader stopped moving and stared at her with surprise. In 300 years of conquering other worlds, Commander, Thex had never met a species that refused to kneel when faced with certain death. Most creatures begged for mercy or tried to bargain for their lives, but this human woman just stood there and defied him. The lights in the laboratory flickered, and somewhere in the distance, alarms began to sound. The crystals pulsed with blue energy that seemed to respond to Hana's heartbeat. The alien. Soldiers raised their weapons, but their leader held up one of his 4 hands to stop them. "What are those stones?" Commander Thex asked. As he pointed at the glowing crystals, Hana turned to look at her samples and smiled for the first time since the aliens had arrived. "They are not just stones," she said. "They are something much more important, something that has been waiting in this system for a very long time." The crystals flashed brighter, and the alien soldiers stepped backward. The youngest, one spoke again in the Vorth language, and this time his voice sounded scared. Commander Thex listened to his soldier, and his burning eyes grew wide with what looked like fear. "The eternal stones," he whispered. "It cannot be possible. They were destroyed long ago." Hana felt the crystals calling to her, and she reached out to touch the largest sample. The moment her fingers made contact, blue energy flowed up her arm and filled her entire body with warmth and power. The aliens watched in shock as threads of light danced between her fingers. "Destroyed?" she said as the energy swirled around her like a protective shield. "No, they were not destroyed. They were hiding. And I think they have been waiting for someone like me to find them." The station shook again as more alien ships moved closer outside. Through the communication system, she could hear voices calling for help from the few crew members who had stayed behind, but Hana was no longer afraid. The crystals had chosen her, and she could feel their ancient wisdom flowing into her mind. She looked at Commander Thex and saw doubt in his burning eyes for the first time. The other aliens were backing toward the door, but their leader stood his ground, even though she could see he was no longer certain. "About anything you came here to make us surrender," she said, as the blue light grew brighter. "But you found something you did not expect. You found humans, and we do not surrender. We fight back." The crystals pulsed one more time and filled the entire laboratory with brilliant blue light. When the glow faded, Hana stood in the center of a circle of energy that made the air itself hum with power. The aliens stared at her, and she stared back, knowing that everything had changed forever. Commander Thex had conquered 47 worlds in his long military career. He had seen entire civilizations fall to their knees when faced with the power of the Vorth Empire. But this small human woman standing in a circle of blue light was something completely new, and it made him feel uncertain for the first time in decades. The energy coming from the crystals was not just light. It was something alive and intelligent that seemed to watch him with invisible eyes. The youngest of his soldiers, Private Kex, stepped further back toward the door and whispered prayers in the old Vorth language that most soldiers had forgotten. The other 2 warriors kept their weapons ready, but Thex could see doubt creeping into their postures. "Your bravery is foolish human," Thex said, as he spread all 4 of his arms wide in a gesture meant to show his overwhelming size and strength. "I have destroyed entire star systems and burned the capitals of 100 worlds. Your little research station means nothing to the Empire." Hana moved to her computer console, and her fingers danced across the holographic interface that showed complex diagrams and measurements. The blue energy from the crystals followed her movements like faithful pets and made the screens glow brighter than they ever had before. "Maybe," she said without looking directly at the towering alien commander. "But this research means everything to anyone who wants to survive what is coming." On the main display screen, molecular structures began rotating slowly, showing the internal patterns of the crystal formations she had been studying for months. The diagrams were beautiful and terrifying at the same time, with geometric shapes that seemed to fold in on themselves in ways that hurt to look at directly. These crystals are not just minerals, Hannah explained as she manipulated the three-dimensional images. They are alive in ways that our science never thought possible. They store energy and information in patterns that should not exist according to everything we know about physics. Private Kex made a choking sound and said something urgent in the Vorth language, Commander. Thex turned his burning red eyes toward the display screen, and his entire body went rigid with shock. His dark stone skin grew even darker, and his four hands clenched into fists that could crush human bones. "You speak of the eternal stones," he whispered, and his voice dropped so low that the universal translator barely caught his words. "That is impossible. They were destroyed millions of years ago in the Great War that ended the First Age." Hannah finally turned away from her computer to face the alien commander directly, and for the first time since they had entered her laboratory, she smiled. The expression was small and quiet, but it carried more confidence than all of Commander Thex's threats and posturing. "Destroyed," she repeated as she gestured toward the crystal samples that covered her work tables. "No, they were not destroyed. They were hidden and, apparently, they chose this star system as their hiding place." She picked up one of the smaller crystal fragments and held it in her palm where it pulsed with warm blue light. "I have been studying them for 6 months, and they respond to human thoughts and emotions in ways that should be completely impossible." The communication system crackled to life, and Security Chief Lee Jun-ho's voice echoed through the laboratory from the command center where he was trapped with the last few remaining crew members. "Dr. Kim, we are reading massive energy fluctuations from your lab. The sensors are going crazy down here." What is happening? Before Hannah could answer, the crystals around the laboratory began to glow much brighter. The light started as a faint, blue shimmer that barely lit the walls, but quickly grew into a brilliant radiance that filled every corner of the room. The energy pulsed in perfect rhythm with Hannah's heartbeat and seemed to respond to her emotions and thoughts. The Vorth soldiers stepped backward toward the exit as their advanced armor began sparking and smoking where the blue energy touched it. Private Kex stumbled and almost fell as his weapon systems shut down completely. The other two warriors tried to maintain their threatening positions, but their equipment was failing all around them. Commander Thex watched his soldiers struggle against an energy field that seemed harmless to the human woman, but devastating to Vorth technology. His confident posture cracked, for the first time in his long military career. "What have you done?" he demanded, as his own armor began to emit warning signals. Hannah looked down at her hands and watched in wonder as threads of blue energy danced between her fingers like living electricity. The crystals were showing her things that no human had ever seen before. Ancient memories of wars fought across the galaxy, and civilizations that had risen and fallen long before Earth had even formed. "I have been asking these crystals to trust me for months," she said, and her voice carried a new authority that made even Commander Thex listen carefully. "I think they finally decided to answer me." The energy field expanded beyond the laboratory and began flowing through the corridors of Kepler Station. Every human still aboard could feel it as a warm presence that seemed to strengthen their courage and clear their minds. Engineer Park Min-soo reported from the engine room that all human systems were running better than they ever had before. Communications Officer Cho Yoon-ji found that her equipment could suddenly reach Earth, despite the jamming signals from the Vorth fleet. But the alien soldiers throughout the station began stumbling and falling as the energy interfered with their technology. Their dark armor sparked and their weapons shut down, leaving them confused and vulnerable for the first time since they had boarded the human facility. "The Eternal Stones choose their partners very carefully," Commander Thex said, and now his voice contained something that might have been respect mixed with ancient fear. In all the old legends of my people, they have never bonded with a species so young, so primitive. The blue energy swirled around Hana like a protective cocoon, and she felt the vast intelligence of the crystals brush against her thoughts. What she saw in that contact changed everything she thought she knew about the universe. The crystals showed her visions of the Vorth Empire not as conquerors, but as refugees, running from something far more terrible. "We are not primitive," she said, and her words carried the combined authority of human determination and crystal wisdom. "We are adaptable. We survive. And we never give up, even when every logical voice tells us we should." The energy pulsed brighter, as if agreeing with her words. "Your empire conquers through fear and overwhelming force. But humans fight differently." Through the station's communication system, they could hear the Vorth fleet commander demanding reports from the boarding parties. The responses were confused and uncertain as soldiers throughout Kepler Station found their equipment failing and their tactical advantages disappearing. Commander Thex looked at his struggling soldiers, then back at the growing energy field that surrounded the human woman. He had a choice to make that would affect not just this battle, but the fate of both species. The old legends spoke of the eternal stones as judges that tested the worthiness of those they encountered. "Perhaps," he said slowly as he deactivated his own weapon and stepped forward, "it is time the Vorth Empire learned what it means to negotiate with equals instead of commanding slaves." The blue light pulsed once more and filled the entire laboratory with warmth that felt like approval. The energy spreading from the crystals was not just light or heat. It was pure information, flowing like a river of knowledge that connected every mind it touched. Hana felt the vast consciousness within the crystal network reaching out to her with curiosity and something that felt like joy. The ancient intelligence had been alone for so long that it had almost forgotten what it meant to communicate with living beings. Engineer Park Min-soo watched in amazement from the engine room as the blue energy flowed through the station's corridors like water finding its way through every crack and pipe. The energy made all the human equipment work better than it ever had before. Computers that had been slow for years suddenly operated at incredible speeds, and communication systems that barely worked before could now reach across the entire solar system. Every human on Kepler Station could feel the warm presence in their minds. It did not hurt or frighten them. Instead, it felt like having a wise friend standing beside them, offering strength and courage when they needed it most. Security Chief Lee Jun-ho reported that his fear had completely disappeared, replaced by a calm confidence that he had never experienced before. But the Vorth soldiers had a very different experience. The blue energy made them stumble and cry out in pain as it passed over their dark armor. Their advanced weapons sparked and shut down completely, leaving them helpless and confused. Private Kex fell to his knees in the laboratory corridor and pulled off his helmet to breathe easier. The Eternal Stones choose their partners very carefully, Commander, Thex said as he watched his soldiers struggle. His voice now carried something that might have been respect, or ancient fear. In all the legends of my people spanning thousands of years, they have never bonded with a species so young, so seemingly primitive. The crystal consciousness touched Hana's mind more deeply, and suddenly she could see the truth about the Vorth Empire. What she saw changed everything. She thought she knew about the aliens who had invaded her station. The crystals showed her visions of the Vorth homeworld, not as the center of a conquering empire, but as a dying planet fleeing from an enemy too terrible to imagine. "We are not primitive," she said, and her voice now carried the combined authority of human determination and crystal wisdom flowing through her words like music. "We are adaptable. We survive against impossible odds, and we never surrender, even when every logical voice tells us we should give up." The blue energy pulsed brighter around her, as if the ancient intelligence agreed completely. The station shuddered as more Vorth ships moved into attack positions outside the hull. Through the communication system, they could hear the alien fleet commander demanding status reports from all boarding parties. But something had changed in the responses from the local ships. There was uncertainty and confusion where there had been confident aggression before. Communications Officer Cho Eun-ji managed to establish a quantum link with Earth Command from her emergency bunker deep in the station's core. "Command, this is Kepler Station," she broadcast with excitement in her voice. "We have a situation that changes everything. The aliens are not invincible. Dr. Kim has discovered something that puts us on equal ground with their technology on Earth." Admiral Song Dae-ho received the transmission with a mixture of hope and disbelief that made his hands shake. The human defense fleet was vastly outnumbered with technology that seemed primitive compared to the Vorth Empire's advanced warships. But if a single research station could hold off an entire alien boarding force, maybe humanity still had a chance to survive this first contact. Back in the laboratory, the crystals pulsed even brighter, and Hana felt their message flowing into her mind with perfect clarity. They had been waiting for a species like humanity for countless millions of years, not because humans were the strongest or the smartest race in the galaxy, but because they had something far more valuable. They were the most stubborn. When faced with extinction, most species either fought with desperate fury until they destroyed themselves or surrendered completely to preserve their lives. But humans did something different. When threatened with total destruction, they did not give up, and they did not go insane with rage. Instead, they adapted and innovated and found new ways to fight back with whatever tools they could find. The Crystal Network had watched civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy for eons. Most species followed predictable patterns when faced with overwhelming threats. They either burned out in glorious but futile resistance or faded away in quiet defeat. But humans seemed capable of finding a third option that involved neither surrender nor self-destruction. Commander Thex felt the crystal energy probing his mind and saw visions of his own people's history that the Empire had tried to forget. The Vorth had not always been conquerors driven by fear and desperation. Once they had been protectors and defenders who used their strength to shield weaker species from galactic threats. But that was before the Devourers came. The memories flowing from the crystals showed him the truth about his empire's endless expansion. It was not conquest for the sake of power or resources. It was flight from an enemy that consumed entire star systems and left nothing behind but empty darkness. The Vorth had become aggressive and cruel, not because they enjoyed dominating others, but because they were terrified of what was chasing them across the galaxy. Through the Crystal Network, Hana could see what Commander Thex was experiencing, and she understood why the Eternal Stones had brought them together. "Your people are not evil," she said gently, as she watched him process the painful visions. "They became something your ancestors never intended, because they were running from something worse." The blue energy swirled around both human and alien as the crystal consciousness shared more of its ancient memories. Images flashed through their minds of massive entities, made of pure darkness, that moved between stars like cosmic predators. They consumed not just planets and civilizations, but the very matter and energy that held solar systems together. Thex looked at his soldiers with new understanding, then turned back to Hana. "We were told that the old ways of protection and honor were signs of weakness," he said quietly. "The High Command taught us that only through conquest could we survive against the enemies that hunt us across space." The crystals pulsed with what felt like approval, and Hana smiled at the alien commander. "Perhaps it is time to remember that running away from your true nature only makes you weaker," she suggested. The energy around them grew warmer and brighter, as if the ancient intelligence was pleased with this development. Security Chief Lee Jun-ho's voice came through the communication system. Again, Dr. Kim, the energy readings are off every scale we have. The crystals are doing something to our equipment, but it seems to be making everything work better than before. Hana felt the crystal network expanding its influence beyond the station and reaching out toward both the human and Vorth fleets. The ancient intelligence was preparing for something bigger than just first contact. Between two species, it was preparing for a war that had been building for millions of years. Commander Thex stood straighter and looked directly into Hana's eyes with his burning red gaze. If your species can truly bond with the eternal stones as you have demonstrated, then perhaps there is still hope for all of us. He turned to his soldiers and spoke in the Vorth language using words and phrases that sounded formal and ancient. "What did you tell them?" Hana asked as she watched the alien soldiers straighten and salute their commander with obvious respect. "That today we remember what it truly means to be." "Vorth," Thex replied with pride returning to his voice. "Today we choose to protect rather than conquer, and today we discover whether two very different species can fight together against the darkness that waits between the stars." News of the alliance spread through both fleets faster than anyone thought possible. The Vorth fleet commanders were furious at first when they received Commander Thex's report about joining forces with the human defenders. They demanded explanations and threatened court-martial for his betrayal of standard conquest protocols. But then the Crystal Network began sharing its visions with every ship in both fleets. Dr. Kim Hana found herself at the center of communications between two completely different civilizations. The Eternal Stones had chosen her as their primary interface, and through her connection both humans and aliens could access the vast knowledge stored within the crystalline consciousness. She discovered that the stones were not just ancient technology, but the condensed memories and wisdom of an entire civilization. The crystal beings had fought against the Devourers billions of years ago, when the galaxy was young and full of life. They had sacrificed everything, including their physical forms, to create a weapon and warning system for future civilizations. The Eternal Stones were their gift to any species brave enough and stubborn enough to stand against the cosmic threat that destroyed World's Admiral Song. Daeho arrived at Kepler Station aboard the fastest ship in the human fleet, bringing with him Earth's greatest scientists and military strategists. The sight that greeted him was unlike anything in human history. Vorth and human personnel worked side by side in the station corridors, sharing technology and knowledge that neither species could have imagined. Dr. Yoon Seo-jin, the quantum physicist who had written most of humanity's theories about faster-than-light travel, found herself working alongside Vorth scientists whose technology was centuries ahead of anything humans had developed. But the aliens needed something that only humans seemed to possess: the ability to interface with the crystal network using pure determination and emotional connection rather than logical analysis. Engineer Park Min-soo made the first major breakthrough when he discovered that human neural patterns could control the Eternal Stones with an intuitive understanding that even the technologically superior Vorth could not match. The crystals responded to human emotions, and the kind of stubborn determination that refused to accept defeat, even when logic suggested surrender was the only option. It's not about intelligence or processing power, Hana explained to the mixed group of researchers who gathered in her laboratory to study the phenomenon. The crystals respond to something deeper than rational thought. They connect with the part of the mind that keeps fighting when everything seems hopeless. The preparations for what everyone knew was coming became frantic but organized. Captain Nam Ki-woo led teams of human pilots who were learning to interface with Vorth ships that had been enhanced with crystal technology. The resulting hybrid vessels were unlike anything either species had ever built before. They combined human creativity and adaptability with Vorth engineering and crystal-enhanced power systems. Meanwhile, Communications Officer Cho Yun-ji worked with Vorth linguists to establish better translation protocols between the two species. What they discovered changed both civilizations. Understanding of how the galaxy actually worked. The Devourers were not just random destroyers or cosmic accidents. They were the universe's immune system designed to eliminate any species that grew too numerous or too powerful. The ancient civilization that had created the Eternal Stones had been trying to find a balance between growth and survival. They wanted younger species to be able to develop and thrive without triggering the cosmic reset that the Devourers represented. The crystals were meant to help new civilizations find that balance by teaching them to work together instead of fighting each other. Security Chief Lee Jun-ho studied the tactical information flowing through the crystal network, and what he found made his blood run cold. The Devourers would arrive in exactly 3 days, bringing with them a force large enough to sterilize both the human solar system and the Vorth home territories. Their ships were not built for conquest or occupation, but for complete destruction. Commander Thex stood before a joint assembly of human and Vorth officers in the station's main conference room. His translated words carried the weight of generations of shame and regret. My people have been running from this enemy for so long that we forgot who we used to be. He admitted, we became conquerors because we were too afraid to remain defenders. The alien commanders. Honesty surprised many of the human officers who had expected arrogance and superiority from their former enemies. Instead, they found soldiers who were tired of running and eager to remember what it felt like to fight for something other than. Survival fear made us cruel, where courage could have made us strong. Thex continued. Hana felt the crystals pulse with approval as she addressed the mixed assembly of humans and aliens. The stones have shown me their plan, she announced, and her voice carried the authority of the ancient intelligence that flowed through her. We are not going to run from this threat, and we are not going to hide. Dr. Yoon Seo-jin raised her hand with a concerned expression on her face. The energy requirements for the crystal weapons are massive beyond anything we have ever attempted, she warned. We will need every ship, every person working in perfect synchronization with no room for error, Admiral. Song stood up and his voice filled the conference room with determination. Then that is exactly what we will do, he declared. Because surrender has never been an option for humanity. Retreat is not possible when our homes are threatened, and giving up is simply not in human nature. The Vorth officers in the room straightened with what looked like relief and newfound respect. They had been running and hiding for so long that they had almost forgotten what it felt like to stand and fight alongside allies instead of commanding slaves and conquered peoples. Through the crystal network, both species could feel the approaching darkness. The Devourers were still 3 days away, but their influence was already affecting nearby star systems. Planets went silent, and entire solar systems simply disappeared from long-range sensors, as if they had never existed. Engineer Park Min-soo worked with Vorth technicians to integrate crystal matrices into every available ship. The human vessels gained power and durability they had never possessed, while the Vorth ships became more responsive and intuitive than their original designers had ever imagined. The hybrid fleet that resulted was small compared to what was coming, but it was something entirely new. Communications Officer Cho Yun-ji established quantum links between Earth and the Vorth homeworld for the first time in either species' history. The message she broadcast was simple and direct. The age of running is over. Today we stand together. Commander Thex looked out at the mixed crews preparing their ships and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Hope the humans had reminded his people what they used to be, and the crystals had given them all a chance to become something better. Hana stood in the center of the crystal network, feeling the determination and courage flowing from thousands of human and Vorth minds. The ancient intelligence that lived within the stones had been waiting for this moment for billions of years. Two species that should have been enemies were instead, becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. The Devourers had consumed countless civilizations by turning them against each other or overwhelming them with superior force. But they had never faced an alliance built on mutual respect and shared stubbornness. The crystals pulsed with anticipation, as if they too were eager to see what would happen when unstoppable force met unmovable determination. In 3 days, the darkness between stars would discover what humans meant when they said, "You can try." The final 3 days before the Devourers arrived passed like a strange dream, where impossible things became normal. Dr. Kim Hana had not slept in 48 hours, but the crystal energy flowing through her body kept her alert and focused. She stood in the command center of Kepler Station, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the positions of every ship in the combined human and Vorth fleet. The Alliance fleet looked pitifully small compared to what the long-range sensors were. Detecting at the edge of the solar system, 237 ships, both human and Vorth, faced an enemy force that numbered in the thousands. Each Devourer vessel was larger than anything either species had ever built, and they moved through space like living shadows that consumed light itself. Admiral Song Dae-ho reviewed the battle plans for the 100th time, knowing that conventional tactics would be useless against an enemy that could dissolve matter at the quantum level. The only advantage they had was the crystal network that connected every allied ship and crew member into a single unified consciousness. Dr. Yoon Seo-jin had worked without rest to understand how the Eternal Stones could be integrated into their weapons and defense systems. What she discovered both amazed and terrified her. The crystals did not just enhance their technology, they fundamentally changed how it worked. Human intuition guided Vorth precision, while crystal wisdom provided power that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Commander Thek stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching human technicians work alongside his own engineers to install crystal matrices into the ship's core systems. The sight would have been unthinkable just days before, but now it felt natural. His soldiers had embraced the alliance with enthusiasm that surprised him. They were eager to fight for something greater than mere survival. Captain Nam Ki-woo led the final training exercises for the hybrid fighter squadrons. Human pilots had learned to fly Vorth ships, while alien crews operated human vessels enhanced with crystal technology. The resulting combat units were unlike anything either species had produced independently. They moved with creativity that confused enemy sensors and struck with precision that maximized every shot. Engineer Park Min-soo reported from the engine rooms of a dozen different ships that the crystal integration was proceeding faster than anyone had dared hope. The stones seemed eager to bond with both human and Vorth technology, as if they had been waiting eons for exactly this combination of determination and capability. Security Chief Lee Jun-ho coordinated the defense plans for Kepler Station, which would serve as the command center for the entire battle. The facility had been transformed into something that was part fortress, part laboratory, and part temple to the ancient wisdom stored in the Crystal Network Communications Officer, Cho. Yoonji maintained constant contact with both Earth and the Vorth homeworld, keeping billions of people informed about humanity's first and possibly last stand against a cosmic threat. Both species had put aside centuries of isolation to face an enemy that threatened all life in the galaxy. The Crystal Network allowed Hana to experience the emotions and thoughts of every person preparing for battle. She felt the fear that naturally came before facing impossible odds, but she also felt something stronger, the determination that defined both humans and the Vorth at their best. Neither species had ever learned to surrender gracefully. Through the ancient intelligence of the stones, she could see the approaching Devourers more clearly than any sensor. They were not ships in any traditional sense, but living voids that consumed everything they encountered. Matter, energy, even the quantum foam that filled empty space. Their hunger was absolute, and their purpose was terrifyingly simple. The Devourers had been created billions of years ago as a fail-safe mechanism when the galaxy was young and chaotic. Whenever a species grew too powerful or too numerous, they would emerge from the dark spaces between stars to restore balance through complete destruction. They were not evil in any sense that living beings could understand. They were simply a force of nature, like gravity or entropy. But the civilization that created the eternal stones had discovered something important about the cosmic immune system. The Devourers could be reasoned with, taught, and even redirected if approached correctly. They responded to displays of cooperation and self-sacrifice in ways that pure aggression could never achieve. The key was proving that different species could work together rather than fighting for dominance. When civilizations showed they could share resources and knowledge instead of competing for them, the Devourers would sometimes spare them. But this had only happened twice in galactic history, and both times the cooperation had come too late to save most of the galaxy. Hana felt the crystal consciousness reaching out across space, touching the minds of the approaching entities. The ancient intelligence was trying to establish communication with the Devourers to show them that something new was happening in this corner of the galaxy. Two species that had every reason to be enemies were instead becoming allies. Dr. Yoon Seo-jin made a final check of the crystal weapon systems and shook her head in amazement. The energy readings were beyond anything human science had thought possible. Each ship in the fleet now carried the concentrated power of an entire star, but channeled through living crystal networks that responded to thought and emotion rather than computer commands. Admiral Song gathered his fleet commanders for the final briefing, both human and Vorth officers listening with equal attention to plans that would determine the fate of both civilizations. "We are not just fighting for our species," he told them. "We are fighting for the right of all life to grow and change and become something better than what came before." Commander Thex addressed his own people with words that carried the weight of redeemed honor. "For too long we have been slaves to our own fear," he said. "But today, we remember what our ancestors knew, that true strength comes from protecting others, not from conquering them." The hybrid crews reported ready from every ship in the fleet. Human creativity had been enhanced by Vorth discipline, while alien technology had been made more responsive by human intuition. The crystal network connected them all into a fighting force that was greater than the sum of its parts. Hana stood at the center of it all, feeling the combined determination of thousands of minds focused on a single purpose. The Devourers expected to find another failing civilization, torn apart by internal conflicts and unable to cooperate in the face of extinction. Instead, they would encounter something the galaxy had never seen before. Through the crystal network, she could sense the approaching darkness, but she was no longer afraid. The ancient intelligence had waited billions of years for this moment when two species would prove that cooperation was stronger than competition, and that stubborn determination could overcome even cosmic forces. Captain Nam Ki-woo led his mixed squadron on the final patrol of the system perimeter. His wing included both human and Vorth pilots flying ships that combined the best of both technologies. They moved with perfect coordination, as if they had trained together for years instead of days. The Devourers would arrive in less than 6 hours, but the Alliance was ready. Every ship carried crystal weapons that could cut through the dark matter armor of their enemies. Every crew member was connected to the network that would coordinate their actions with impossible precision. Engineer Park Min-soo made his final systems check and smiled at the readings. The crystal matrices were humming with power that seemed to resonate with the determination of every person preparing to fight. The stones had chosen well when they bonded with humanity and the Vorthin. 6 hours. The darkness between stars would learn what it meant to face an alliance built on mutual respect, shared courage, and the kind of stubborn determination that refused to accept defeat, even when facing impossible odds. The universe was about to discover what happened when two species stood together and said you can try. The Devourers arrived like a wall of absolute darkness that swallowed the light from distant stars. Their ships were not vessels in any sense that living beings could understand, but rather holes in reality itself that consumed everything they touched. The largest of them was bigger than Earth's moon, while countless smaller entities swarmed around the giants like antibodies in the blood of space itself. Dr. Kim Hana stood at the center of the crystal network aboard Kepler Station feeling every heartbeat and thought from the 237 ships that made up their combined fleet. The alliance looked impossibly small against the approaching darkness, but each vessel pulsed with blue energy that connected them into something greater than the sum of their parts. Admiral Song Dae-ho transmitted the final battle orders to all ships using both human and Vorth communication systems. All ships, this is Fleet Command, he announced with steady determination in his voice. Today, we fight not as separate species, but as one people defending our right to exist in this galaxy. Remember, they came here to destroy us. Let us show them what a terrible mistake that was. The battle began exactly as expected, with the Devourers unleashing waves of pure entropy designed to dissolve matter at the quantum level. The dark energy washed over the Alliance fleet like a tide of destruction that had consumed countless civilizations, but the crystal-enhanced shields held firm, creating barriers of organized matter and energy that had never existed before. Captain Nam Ki-woo led his mixed squadron of human and Vorth fighters in maneuvers that should have been impossible. His pilots used human intuition to guide alien technology, while the Crystal Network allowed them to coordinate their movements with precision that bordered on telepathy. They struck at the smaller Devourer entities with weapons that combined Vorth power with human creativity through the network Hana could feel. Every shot fired every shield impact and every moment of courage and fear from thousands of allied personnel. She became the living coordination center for the entire fleet, using her connection with the crystals to direct energy and resources where they were needed most. When engineer Park Min-soo's ship lost power, she instantly rerouted energy from 3 other vessels. Commander Thex found his flagship surrounded by dark entities that tried to drain the life from his crew. But the Crystal Network allowed Human Communications Officer Cho Yun-ji to guide a rescue formation through dimensional space that conventional navigation said was impossible. The Vorth commander felt tears of gratitude streaming down his alien face as he realized his people were no longer alone in their fight. The tide of battle shifted when Dr. Yoon Seo-jin made a crucial discovery that changed everything. The Devourers are not just trying to consume our ships and crews, she broadcast across the entire network. They are attempting to devour the crystals themselves and delete the stored consciousness of every civilization that ever resisted them. Security Chief Lee Jun-ho coordinated the defense of Kepler Station as dark entities tried to board the facility. But the crystal energy that flowed through every corridor made their weapons useless, while human determination guided by ancient wisdom created defensive strategies that the Devourers had never encountered before. Hana felt the vast intelligence of the eternal stones responding to the threat with power that made space itself tremble. The crystals had spent billions of years preparing for this moment when they could finally fight back against the cosmic immune system that had destroyed so many civilizations. Not going to happen, she said, and her voice carried through both fleets with absolute certainty that resonated in every mind connected to the network. You want our memories, our stories, our stubborn refusal to die quietly. Come and take them if you can. The final phase of the battle was not fought with conventional weapons or defensive shields. It was fought with pure determination and the accumulated will of every species that had ever refused to surrender. The eternal stones released their stored memories, projecting the defiance of 1 billion civilizations directly into the consciousness of the Devourers. The dark entities that had consumed entire galaxies suddenly found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. Instead of the expected fear and despair, they met the combined courage of species that had chosen to fight together rather than die alone. The network showed them what they had forgotten in their eons of mechanical destruction, Admiral. Song watched in amazement as the darkness began to retreat for the first time in galactic history. "They are falling back," he reported, hardly believing the words that came from his own mouth. "The impossible is happening. They are actually retreating. Commander." Thek stood on his bridge with tears of joy streaming down his face as he felt his people's ancient honor being restored. "The crystals are teaching them," he said with wonder in his voice. "They are showing the devourers what they lost when they became nothing more than destroyers." Through the crystal network, every person in the Alliance could feel what was happening. The devourers were remembering their original purpose, which had not been destruction for its own sake, but protection of the galaxies. Balance. They had been created to prevent any single species from dominating all others, but they had forgotten that cooperation was better than domination. The ancient intelligence within the Eternal Stones had spent eons waiting for this exact moment. Two species that should have been natural enemies had instead chosen to become allies, and in doing so they had shown the cosmic immune system a better way to maintain galactic balance. Hana felt the devourer consciousness touching her mind, with something like curiosity rather than hunger. They were ancient beyond measure, but they had been alone for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to communicate with living beings. The crystals served as translators, allowing understanding to flow between organic life and cosmic force. The largest of the dark entities began to change its shape, becoming less like a void and more like something that could exist in normal space. Its voice, when it finally spoke through the crystal network, was like the sound of stars being born. "We have forgotten why we were made," it said with sadness that spanned galaxies. "You were made to protect balance," Hana replied with compassion that surprised everyone, including herself. "But balance does not require destruction. It requires cooperation." The crystal network pulsed with approval as her words reached every mind in both fleets and beyond. The devourers began to withdraw, not in defeat, but in contemplation. They had learned something from the Alliance that changed their fundamental understanding of their purpose. Organic life did not have to be a threat to galactic stability if different species could work together instead of fighting for dominance, Communications Officer Cho Yun-ji broadcast. "To Earth, the Vorth homeworld, and every ship in both fleets mission accomplished," she announced with joy and disbelief in her voice. "The galaxy is safe, and we are all still here to celebrate." Dr. Kim Hana, the woman who had refused to surrender when faced with certain death, had not only saved her own species, but had forged an alliance that would protect countless worlds for generations to come. When the aliens had first threatened to kill her, she had stood her ground and said, "You can try in the end." It was the darkness itself that had tried to destroy everything she cared about, but human stubbornness, enhanced by alien honor and guided by ancient wisdom, had proven stronger than cosmic force. The universe had learned something new about the power of cooperation over conquest. The Eternal Stones pulsed one final time with what felt like satisfaction and gratitude. Their long wait was over, and the galaxy woe